It's in our milk, it's in our cereal, we're told to get it from the sun. Vitamin D seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, what if I told you the official advice on it is not just a little off, but maybe completely wrong? Today, we're diving deep into the surprisingly fierce debate around this so-called sunshine vitamin.
It all boils down to this one simple question. But the answer? Yeah, it's anything but simple. This single question has sparked a huge fight between official health organizations and a growing chorus of critics who say the advice we're getting is dangerously low.
And this really shows you just how big the gap is. On one side, you've got the official US government recommendation, 600 international units a day. On the other, you have critics who looked at the government's own data and said, nope, we need closer to 9,000 IU. That is a massive difference, more than 14 times higher. So how on earth did we end up with two numbers that are in completely different universes?
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the official number. Where did that 600 IU even come from? Well, the answer leads us to a very powerful and influential group, the Institute of Medicine.
The Institute of Medicine, or IOM, is a huge deal. Think of them as the expert panel that advises the US government on all things health. Their recommendations literally shape public policy for millions of people. When they set a standard, it sticks.
So how did the IOM land on 600 IU? Back in 2011, they went through more than 1,000 studies. Their main goal was pretty specific: prevent bone diseases. And they wanted to make sure their number worked for almost everybody, 97.5% of us, to be exact, even people who get very little sun. On the surface, it sounds incredibly careful, right? Totally thorough. But this is where the story takes a wild turn. Because just a few years later, a bombshell accusation dropped. A claim that the IOM's super careful science had a massive fundamental flaw baked right into it. In 2014, a couple of researchers published a paper that really shook things up. Here's the crazy part. They didn't use any new data. They just went back and reanalyzed the IOM's own numbers and claimed they found a giant statistical mistake. So, what was this supposed mistake? Okay, think about it like this. Imagine you need to make sure everyone in a room has enough water. The critics say the IOM basically calculated the average amount of water needed, but if you do that, by definition, half the people in the room are still thirsty. The critics argue the IOM should have figured out the dose needed to make sure almost every single person in the room got enough, which, remember, was their own stated goal. And according to that reanalysis, once you correct for that one statistical issue, everything changes. The dose you need to actually hit the IOM's goal wasn't 600 IU. It was a jaw-dropping 8,895 IU a day. You can imagine this huge gap has fueled some really intense criticism. Prominent voices like Dr. Eric Berg have gone so far as to accuse the official bodies of ignoring this on purpose, all to protect what he calls a sickness industry. And for the critics, this isn't just a one-time mistake. They look at this and say, see, this is part of a pattern. They believe there's a history here that shows something troubling is going on. Critics will point to other IOM reports that have been surrounded by controversy, like their work on Agent Orange, which was accused of downplaying the effects on veterans, or the report that dismissed links between silicone implants and illness, and a report on pain that downplayed the risks of opioid addiction, which it turns out was funded by opioid makers. And this isn't just fringe stuff you find online. The skepticism has been laid out in a whole series of books by serious authors and researchers who've dug into these cases, arguing there's a pattern of corporate influence and manufactured doubt. But hold on, that is only one side of the story. The scientific establishment has a very strong defense for its recommendation, and it's absolutely crucial that we understand their side of the argument too. So what's the comeback? Well, defenders of the IOM have several key points. First, they say an external review in 2017 actually looked at that supposed statistical error and concluded it didn't change the final recommendation. They also push back on the idea that everyone is deficient, pointing to surveys that show most people are doing just fine. Plus, and this is a big one, they warn that pushing for super high doses is risky and can lead to toxic levels of calcium in your blood. And maybe their most important point, they say there's just not enough solid evidence for all the other benefits of vitamin D, beyond bone health, to justify a higher dose. And it's worth noting other countries, like the UK, have come to a very similar low recommendation. So, we have experts clashing, we have accusations flying back and forth. What in the world does this all mean for you? How do you get past all this debate and find an answer that actually works?
At the end of the day, this vitamin D controversy is about more than just a nutrient. It really gets at this core tension between the slow, super cautious process of official science and this deep-seated worry about systemic bias and who's influencing the research.
So, the most sensible path forward probably isn't picking a side in this huge fight, but to get personal. The source material suggests a really clear three-step plan. First, get your vitamin D levels tested. Second, actually talk to your doctor about what those numbers mean for you. And third, work with them to find a dose that's tailored specifically for your body, your diet, and your lifestyle.
And just so you know, the information we've walked through in this explainer is all based on some really thorough reporting from the Shasta Beacon, which did a fantastic job compiling the data from all sides of this pretty complex issue. And all of this leaves us with one last big question. In a world with so much conflicting data, where even the experts can't agree, how do we as individuals figure out who to trust and decide what's actually true for our own health?